Welcome to the Patrick Coffin Show. This episode of the show is brought to you by MyPillow. Now go to mypillow.com. I was going to give out the 800 number, but you're probably not sitting there with the pen and pencil ready to rock. So mypillow.com. My name, Patrick, gets you a coupon discount. I've interviewed the CEO, Mike Lindell, former crack addict, now CEO. I just watched Mike on a press conference with President Trump, and he's just really part of the solution in this COVID-19 lockdown, devoting so much of his company to making up for the windfall in masks, cotton-made, American-made masks. And if they're anything like the pillows, this is a great deal. So go to mypillow.com, my name Patrick, at the coupon checkout, gets you a massive discount. So what's the tie-in between getting a good rest and this week's topic and guest? What do you think is the biggest threat to America today? ISIS, Al-Qaeda, militant Islam around the world, Vladimir Putin, President Donald Trump? Well, my guest today lays out a very persuasive case that the correct answer is China. He's retired Air Force Brigadier General Robert Spalding, and from 2014 to 2016, he led the China Division at the Joint Chiefs of Staff and was the U.S. Defense Attache at the U.S. Embassy in Bejing, China. General Spalding has been an evaluator pilot for the B-2 bomber and is fluent in Mandarin. I'm sure that's a very short list of people who've flown the B-2 and fluent in Mandarin. His latest book is titled Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elites Slept. See, there's the tie-in. Brigadier General, thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And to be precise, it's the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, thank you. Chinese Communist Party.
Between the people and the country and the party, because it's really the regime of the party that's the problem.
Yes, you've taken an arrow from my quiver. I wanted to start by making that distinction between the Chinese people, which I know you love. You've lived there, you've lived with them, and I'm sure you've got a lot of Chinese friends, and the CCP. See, I've accustomed myself to calling it the commie virus or the CCP virus.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that's a very good distinction. The book has me up at nights. I read every page of Stealth War, and I had no idea on how many fronts the CCP have made inroads in creating an ally out of the United States, and all of the subterfuges, the deceptions, the half-truths. Maybe start with this observation. In addition to all the facts and the incredible array of names and dates in your timeline, I noticed an underlying tone of frustration. Does this frustration stem from the memo that you sent out? Because maybe we can start with that. It seemed like, aside from the Jerry Maguire screenplay for the Tom Cruise movie, what you were talking about 5G in that memo. Was that the origin of this book?
No, actually, the origin of the book is really a realization that, when I go out and talk to people, most of the time, actually all the time, as a representative of the United States government, particularly when I was in the White House, but really all the time that I engaged with people, I had to essentially go under Chatham House rules. In other words, I couldn't allow what I was saying about what I knew, what was going on, to go beyond the room that I was speaking in. And it was really, it was under those conditions that I kind of tried to spread the message. And what I realized is if I was going to be of service to our nation and really help turn this around, that I had to get out of from under those rules and really be allowed to speak and share everything that I had learned. So The origin of the book is really just wanting to get the message out there behind what the Trump administration is doing, why we have the current national security strategy we do, and everything that I'd learned in the last 5 years of my career. It was shocking to me. So, I'm glad to hear that it's shocking to you. And I just wanted to share that.
I get to interview Patrick Buchanan a couple of times, and Pat wrote the speech that President Nixon gave to the greatest mass murderer in history, Mao Zedong, in 1972, I believe it was. How different is President Trump with respect to the CCP than the presidents from Nixon on?
Well, I think what I saw when I was at the White House, he gets a lot of criticism for everything nearly that happens. But in reality, when things were brought to him that I would have taken a different approach to, and that's nearly everything that we've done within national security. He was the one that was actually asking the questions about why are we doing this? Why are we spending $45 billion a year in Afghanistan? What other things could we be spending that money on? Why are we allowing our companies to basically be destroyed by the Chinese Communist Party? And in reality, our government wasn't asking those questions. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people that take offense to those. So he's the one that's been behind a lot of the changes. It's in what's happened now because he's stood up to them and he's actually backed up the national security strategy. The bureaucracy is actually beginning to turn. It's beginning to confront this reality that of the stealth war that's going on that was right in front of their faces, but really they chose not to look at.
Is part of this line in the sand, which is a form of standing up in a way because it clarifies where that line is, were they the trade tariffs that were imposed, I want to say 2018, on China to respond to their unfair international trade practices?
That's just one of the elements of what's going on in terms of what the federal government is currently doing. I mean, Patrick, we had Ministry of State Security officials in our country running around essentially doing forced rendition of Chinese nationals who had escaped China and taking them back to China because they wanted to extract money from them or for whatever reason. And the State Department was preventing the Department of Justice from actually preventing this kind of behavior from happening on our soil. And so this is a kind of activity that's been going on. And I found out about it back in 2014, 15, and I was horrified. But our government really wasn't protecting people on our own soil. And so when you find that and you say, well, he's unlocked the enforcement arm of so many departments and agencies in our government to begin to unwind all that's been going on. And so tariffs are the most prominent, I think, in the media in terms of what's going on. But just allowing the DOJ and the FBI to do their job in terms of rounding up these people that are doing very bad things in our country is also part of it. Commerce, Treasury, U.S. Trade Representative, State Department, they're all playing a role in trying to essentially begin to protect the American people like they should have been doing in the beginning.
How big a shift was allowing China to the World Trade Organization in 2001? Let's start with how many U.S. jobs do you estimate were lost since that time?
Just in manufacturing alone, it's estimated over 3 million manufacturing jobs. But then when you consider that 4 jobs for every manufacturing job approximately in the community, so over 13 million jobs overall lost in our economy. And what people don't realize is a lot of those jobs were jobs that people had worked in for decades. They had health benefits, they had retirement benefits. When you think of the American dream for the working class, a lot of those factory jobs were the ways that they, were able to provide a home for their family, to raise a family, to send their kids to college. Some of those kids became part of the white collar class. So in essence, when you look at our society and the way it's structured, the working class really, in a lot of ways, is the seed corn for a lot of our white collar class. And so when you look at that ecosystem, if you think of it as an ecosystem, we wiped out a big portion of our society in terms of and we took away a lot of the feeling of pride and ownership and membership or citizenship of the country from that group. So it's been devastating. That was, the realization for that was more in 2016, after I'd been working on this for 2 years, right? So we started looking at it just from the defense industrial base perspective. But when you started considering all those jobs lost, then you began to see it was not only a national security problem, but a social problem.
Yeah, I'm sure that any layer of the onion is going to have at least a dozen other layers beneath it, and it kind of spreads out. And I suppose this could easily be a book series, correct?
It could, and what I tried to do is write a book that people could read and get the whole story in one reading, and keep it short and succinct and to the point, because I could have written a 7-volume or more series, because a lot of this stuff is very complicated in terms of how it works. And so I tried to take all that complication out, take everything I'd learned and distill it to just kind of what are some of the key stories and anecdotes that really is representative to me of what's going on.
You cite a lot of sources. You're generous with sending people to other writers, other influencers. And one book that you return to time and again is Unrestricted Warfare from, I believe, 1999. Tell us about that book. Why is that seminal?
Well, it's seminal for one reason, is it was so far ahead of its time in terms of anticipating the power of openness, of globalization, the internet, for a nation like the Chinese Communist-led China to take advantage of the system by essentially, another way of that it's been interpreted, the title is War Without Rules. So Unrestricted Warfare has been one way that the title that's been translated, but another way to think of it is War Without Rules. And so they looked at, okay, what if we were invited into this open system, and we said we were going to follow the rules, but we didn't.
Yep.
What could we achieve? And so they lay out in the pages of that book what they could achieve, but they were so far ahead of their time. When I read it in 1999, and I looked at it from the perspective of a guy that had, trained and done professional military education. I understood strategy. I understood war fighting. I understood the operational art of war. When I read the book, it made no sense to me. I could not envision the things that they were saying really being as a part of warfare. Mm-hmm. And so I read it and I put it away, and I really didn't reevaluate the text of that until I was back in the Pentagon. That was 2015 when I picked it back up and reread it. And when you reread it in the era of Ukraine and Crimea and the Donbass in Ukraine, and you begin to think about how the world's changed, becoming so interconnected, but interconnected with a lot of these rogue regimes, then you realize that they were so far ahead of their time that they were describing that world, but they were describing it in the context before we'd even really understood that was what we were seeing. Unrestricted
warfare. Yeah, that's warfare without rules probably captures it better than unrestricted, because unrestricted is a little bit mushy. It almost suggests either eternal or we're going to do what we want when we want.
Yeah, it was a bad interpretation.
Yeah. Chinese author?
Chao Liang, and then Wang Xiangsui, I think, is the co-author. Chao Liang is really the brains behind it. He actually got promoted to the rank of general. He teaches in their National Defense University. Of course, when you talk to Chinese scholars here in the U.S., or when you talk to officials in China, they'll try to discount the effect that book and certainly Chao Liang's had on the system. But you don't really get promoted to general officer and then asked to teach at the National Defense University if you didn't have some impact. And then when you begin to look at the things that they say in that book, and then you look at the things that the Chinese Communist Party has done, you really begin to see a close connection between what they wrote and what they've actually executed.
Hey, this is Patrick Coffin. If you like what you see and hear, and you want to see and hear more, consider joining Coffin Nation as a full member. Just click right here and find out more about what that means. Nipsey, my fedora. That's Coffin Nation, the world's largest online community of culture builders. Click right here. See you on the inside.